And under intense pressure, Mahinda Rajapaksa quit as Prime Minister, but the protests have only intensified. Some protesters close to the Rajapaksa family or the party are alleged to have beaten up protesters and set their tents on fire. And this, as you heard Arjuna Ranatunga there, led to a huge backlash. Multiple homes were set on fire, so much so that Mahinda Rajapaksa had to be evacuated by air and taken to a Sri Lankan naval base at Trincomalee. As protests escalated across Sri Lanka, Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family fled the Prime Minister's official residence in a military helicopter and were forced to take refuge at a Sri Lankan naval base at Trincomalee. But protesters reached the Sri Lanka Navy base and protests raged through the day despite Rajapaksa submitting his resignation as Prime Minister of Sri Lanka on Monday. Overnight protests resulted in more than 40 homes of political leaders associated with the ruling dispensation being torched in Sri Lanka. The ancestral home of the Rajapaksa family was also set on fire by protesters up in arms over the country's worst economic crisis since its birth in 1948.
I think it was a highly unwanted situation created by the Prime Minister who resigned yesterday. These protesters, these peaceful protesters have been protesting for almost 1 month without any violence. I think he and the ministers who provoked these people should take the blame on this issue.
Not satisfied with torching homes, shops and offices of ruling party members and supporters, protesters also brought down the statue of D.A. Rajapaksa, father of the Rajapaksa brothers, insisting on the resignation now of the Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Everyone who is involved in this government, including President Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Rajapaksa, must be held responsible for this inhumane attack. This was a planned attack. This was a thought-out project. This was an act of state terrorism and political terrorism. The Rajapaksas must be held responsible for this.
The Sri Lankan army has now been called out to restore law and order, and shoot-at-sight orders have been issued to ensure that the situation does not spiral out of control after a day of arson and violence.
भारत क्योंकि पड़ोसी देश है श्रीलंका का, भारत चाहता है वहां पर शांति हो, सौहार्दपूर्ण सभी कुछ हो और जो उनका मसला है ठीक से सुलझ जाए, तो हम उम्मीद तो यही करेंगे जो वहां पर गृह युद्ध नहीं होता है, क्योंकि अगर गृह युद्ध होता है तो भारत के लिए भी बहुत बड़ी चिंता बन जाएगी.
New Delhi is watching the situation closely, and the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement saying, as a close neighbor of Sri Lanka with historical ties, India is fully supportive of its democracy, stability and economic recovery. India has extended this year alone support of $3.5 billion. Despite shoot-at-sight orders and emergency powers given to the army and the police to restore law and order, Sri Lanka totters on the brink of a bloody civil war. Bureau Report, India Today.